Hello from Canadian Treaty 4 territory. I'm really sad that I'm not there in person, but I'm grateful that I can give this talk remotely. And I'm really sorry this is going to be depressing. So I'm here to talk about all of the bad things that are happening due to the rapid commercialization of low Earth orbit. Satellite megaconstellations, these are constellations of thousands or tens of thousands of satellites that have a single purpose, mostly for delivering internet access. And the problem is due to the very large numbers and to the disposability of these satellites, right? Because they're mass produced, they're cheaply built, they're just burned up in the atmosphere when they're done. And they're not small, right? These are like truck-sized satellites that are just chucked into the atmosphere at the end of their lifetimes. We can still get many of the same benefits with fewer satellites in orbit, and that's really important to keep in mind. Here is a lovely photo that probably many people at this conference will show from Nambung National Park in Western Australia, just really highlighting how much the night sky has been changed already by satellite megaconstellations, mostly by Starlink, right? Starlink has almost 8,000 satellites in orbit as of today out of 12,000 total satellites, right? One American private company owned by one billionaire now controls orbit effectively, right? That's where we are. This is, some of my images from one of my images from the Canada, France, Hawaii telescope. All of the horizontal and diagonal lines are satellites that flew through the field of view while we were looking for Kuiper Belt objects. And you can see here's a little Kuiper Belt object trucking along that gets just obliterated by a satellite that flies through. Anyone who looks up at the night sky has noticed these. So I know I'm not there, but raise your hand if you have seen satellites in the sky. I assume everybody. Raise your hand if you've seen a Starlink train. They're really freaky looking. So right when they first launch, they're on lower orbit, so they're brighter and they're close together. It really looks like a UFO. I know I have fielded so many UFO reports because of Starlink. I'm sure many of you have as well. They're changing the night sky for everyone in the world, regardless of if they can afford to access satellite internet or not. This photo is a 5-second exposure from Saskatchewan by a local astrophotographer that just really highlights how many satellites there are and how easy they are to see. As we move forward, this is a simulation of 65,000 satellites at the latitude of Melbourne, where you all are. And so you can see this is the prediction for the summer solstice with 65,000 satellites. Anything that is pink, orange, or yellow is naked eye visible, right? So you will have naked eye visible satellites at your zenith all night long, and that's true almost everywhere in the world. It's really quite significant how much the night sky changes worldwide. And as a consequence of so many satellites going up, they have to come back down. Everything that's launched into low Earth orbit, the end of life plan is to burn it up in the atmosphere. And if it doesn't burn up all the way, even though companies say that they will, then it lands on things on the ground, like near my house last year. These are pieces of a Crew Dragon trunk that fell near Ituna, Saskatchewan last year. This is this part of the spacecraft underneath where the astronauts sit. The exact same spacecraft pieces fell on Australia from the very first Crew Dragon trunk, the first Crew Dragon launch back in 2022. Looks familiar to me now that I've seen them in person. And this is becoming more and more common just because there's so many satellites being launched and coming back down again. There's also a lot of pollution associated with launches, and it used to be that they were infrequent enough that it wasn't significant, but the exhaust from these rockets is deposited at very high altitudes. So even something like water vapor can be very damaging to the chemistry at high altitudes where there's not supposed to be water. We can see the effects of rocket launches changing the atmosphere. We have these high altitude noctilucent clouds that are much more visible than they used to be. there's ionospheric holes that are visible after rocket launches, kind of like fake auroras. We know this must be changing atmospheric chemistry, but it's only just starting to be studied exactly how. What's much scarier is the reentry pollution. So Starlink alone, it is planning, conservatively for 30,000 satellites. Let's say conservatively again that they're each 1,000 kilograms. I've seen higher numbers than that for some of their newer satellites. They only have 5-year lifetimes at the most. That means they have to dispose of 16 tons of satellites per day by burning them up in the atmosphere, right? And that doesn't go away. That's metal and plastic and computer parts and solar panels that get deposited in the upper atmosphere, right? So that's 8 tons of aluminum, because most of the mass of satellites is their aluminum frame. That's way more than naturally enters the atmosphere every day from meteoroids, which are mostly rocks, not mostly metal, right? As of today, Starlink published their catalog of reentries and conjunctions. They average 2 to 3 satellite reentries per day. They're smaller, the earlier ones, but this is still already double the natural infall rate of aluminum. They've been doing that every day for the last 6 months. What's that gonna do? This reentry pollution is already measurable. Already 10% of stratospheric aerosols have been measured to be from satellite and rocket body reentries. Right, so there's this purple line is the number of satellites in orbit, right? And you can see there's this hockey stick when Starlink starts launching. The green line is the reentries. We're just getting to the hockey stick in reentries now due to that hockey stick in launches. So this is going to change a lot more. So alumina has kind of been the focus from reentries. Like when aluminum gets deposited, it can form alumina that can change the opacity, that can cause ozone depletion, maybe. Right, like this is very poorly studied. There's lots of other metals that are deposited that are basically not present in meteoroids. So what is that going to do? We're just running this experiment. It's really quite scary. Then operations of satellites, right? We all rely on satellites for all sorts of useful information every day, whether or not you get internet from satellites. This is the number of satellites in orbit. The functional satellites is the orange, right? You can see that hockey stick again. But the amount of debris is even more. We actually just crossed the line where trackable debris is less than operational payloads, but it's still a lot. When we look at how often there are close approaches between satellites, so let's say less than a kilometer is an easy one to measure. Right, that sounds like a big passage, right? Because it's a whole kilometer. But remember that everything in orbit is traveling at 7 kilometers per second. So 1 kilometer close approaches is actually terrifyingly close. And those are happening every few minutes in Starlink's orbit. Starlink just reported that they do an average of 1 collision avoidance maneuver every 2 minutes over the last 6 months. So that means that every 2 minutes there's an opportunity for a mistake that could lead to a catastrophic collision, and it's already so dense in that part of orbit that we could very easily end up in this runaway collisional cascade, sometimes called the Kessler Syndrome, and not be able to use orbit anymore. And that's the worst case scenario. I don't want the sky to be like a sparkling snow globe of debris. That's what it would look like. In addition to not being able to use low Earth orbit anymore for satellites for decades to centuries, right? Like this is the worst case scenario. We need to avoid this. But that's not the way satellite companies seem to see it, right? They're just launching. I just complained about Starlink a lot because they are the first ones to get into orbit, but there are so many other companies that are doing the exact same thing. You can see right? There's actually a million satellites that companies have asked for. There is no way we can have that many satellites in orbit safely. We absolutely need international regulation of satellites, right? There's ones like this one. This is actually the smaller one. There's ones that are 4 times as big that have been launched now. They want to have 200 of those. They are as bright as the brightest stars in the sky when they're launched. There is no international regulation happening right now. We need that. And in order to keep using orbit without severe environmental consequences, we need fewer satellites with longer operational lifetimes. We absolutely need that. That is the engineering challenge for the future. So there are a lot of groups that are fighting for this kind of regulation. I just want to highlight a few of them that I have been involved in. I'm not doing this very gracefully, sorry. Okay, so IAU, the International Astronomical Union, has the Center for the Protection of Dark and Quiet Skies, very long name. But they're doing really great work. There's really good resources here, and you can apply to be a member. There is the American Astronomical Society has a committee called COMPASS that focuses on light pollution from the ground and from space. We have many, so I am co-chair of this committee. We have many different subcommittees that work on different aspects of this, and you do not need to be an astronomer to join this. We welcome anybody to come help. So please talk to me if you're interested in working on any of these issues related to night sky access and protecting the space environment. There's also the Outer Space Institute. This is a Canada-based but highly international group that's very focused on policy. It's not really one that's kind of open for anybody to join, but there's a lot of really good resources here and newsletters and talking about what they're working on really at the UN level. So this is big picture. And then there's this group that just started up, the Center for Space Environmentalism, right? So space is legally not considered an environment, which is where a lot of these major problems are coming from. You can't apply any kind of environmental regulations to something that's not considered an environment, even though it's very much tied to our atmosphere and our oceans and the land, right? It's ridiculous that it's not considered an environment. And Hilde Nielsen has talked about how it's not an environment that we can really give back to. So we should think about being in this environment as guests, right? And that is absolutely not what we are doing right now. So there's a few starting points. If you have others that you know of, other groups that are working for trying to get some kind of regulation, some kind of getting people to think about limits on what we can place into orbit, I would love to talk to you. Okay, so what can you do as an individual? Individually, this is really hard, right? Because we are fighting against a corporation that is owned by literally the richest guy in the world, right? So giant corporations like this will only respond to two things. Legislation, which is very slow and is now totally not going to happen in the US, which is bad. But they also respond to consumer pressure, right? So if you have alternatives, don't use Starlink. I realize that's not a good option for a lot of people, especially in rural places, on First Nations. Internet access is terrible, right? I completely understand why people are jumping on Starlink internet access because the alternatives are terrible. So if you do use Starlink internet because you don't have other options, tell them as a customer that you're concerned about their safety practices, you're concerned about their environmental practices, because odds are they will listen to you as a paying customer more than they will listen to me as a complaining astronomer. Talk to your local government, all levels of government, about getting better internet access to people in rural places, in remote places, on First Nations. right? There's many alternatives that don't rely on a billionaire-owned, super polluting satellite network. But they need funding and support from the government. Tell people what's happening, right? Most people have no idea how bad the situation in orbit is. And show people the sky, right? I know many of you are astronomers and knowledge keepers and share the sky with people all the time. Please keep doing it, and thank you so much. And get out and enjoy it yourself, because it is changing. So yeah, all of us who look up at the night sky, we are the ones who are noticing these terrible changes that are happening. And we are the ones who need to tell people about it. So please, I'd love to hear more from you. If you have ideas for coming together and fighting for regulation of orbit. Thank you for listening, and I hope to talk to some of you more.